Hello and welcome back to Rock Records Reviewed. My name's Adam, and this week we're going to review and rank all the albums by none other than Blondie. Blondie, I'm sure you know, from New York. They formed in 1974 by lovers singer Debbie Harry and guitarist Chris Stein. Very much part of the pre-punk and post-punk scene there, of the CBGB scene, with the New York Dolls and the Ramones and Talking Heads and all those kind of people. They made 6 albums with Chrysalis before splitting up and then reforming many years later in 1997 to great fanfare. Although we hear their music all the time on the radio, I think the band itself is often overshadowed by Debbie Harry's formidable image, and reputation as a pop music icon. I mean, she's always obviously been very beautiful, but she's also very outspoken on many issues. And she's her own person, and in many ways one of the leading figures of female empowerment in music. But she's absolutely iconic, to the point where even Andy Warhol has turned her into a painting. I mean, at their best, I think Blondie made some of the best pop rock music on the planet. They sold over 40 million albums worldwide, but you also may know that they were famously ripped off by their managers, so they never really had the big payday that other bands of that era with that kind of success had. They were very popular in the UK, particularly, where they had 6 number ones. And yours truly was a member of the fan club back in the day. Fan clubs, whatever happened to those? If you're a member of a fan club, then let us know in the comments below, because do they still go anymore? I don't know. I think that the albums they made when they reformed are kind of murky waters for a lot of Blondie fans. I know that some Blondie fans are almost afraid to go there, in the fear that the albums are going to be a serious disappointment compared to the great stuff they did in the late 70s. And I have to be honest, they were a bit of an unknown quantity for me as well, some of them. So I've done a bit of revision for this list and gone back to revisit them and see what I really think of them. And let's see where they belong. But let's get to it. So at number 11 of their 11th albums is their 10th album from 2014, Ghosts of Download. This was released with a compilation album called Blondie 40 Ever to mark their 40th anniversary. The clue of the sound of this record is in the title, Ghosts of Download. It's kind of a very electronic record. A lot of it was written by Chris Stein on computer. And the band collaborates with hip-hop artists and electronica artists. And it's hard to say how this album would have done on its own, because it was released with that compilation. But it did get to number 16 in the UK. But how much of that was down to the compilation album, we don't know. But the thing to say about the compilation album is it's a compilation of re-recorded classics, and that's one of my pet hates when bands do that. Most of the tracks on this album were written by Debbie Harry and Chris Stein. There's a few co-writers involved as well. And I have to be honest, it kind of leaves me cold a bit. The album sounds like it's been pro-tooled and logicked to within an inch of its life. And as such, the sound of it is a little bit thin and shallow. Songs arose by any other name, Sugar on the Side, they sort of little sort of modest hooks here and there. Latin vibes occasionally on the record. But it doesn't really do a great deal for me. At number 10, their 9th album from 2011, Panic of Girls. This was their first new album in 8 years, and in that time Debbie Harry's voice had certainly changed. It had got richer, the register of it had got lower. It was recorded in Woodstock, only the second album they ever recorded outside of New York. And it was their first album without keyboard player Jimmy Destry, who was meant to be on it. But so what happened between demoing and releasing the album, one can only guess at. It was originally released independently in the UK in supermarkets with a magazine. And then in the USA a few months later exclusively through Amazon. Mother and What I Heard were the singles, but you know what? Listening to it, it's all a bit pedestrian, and I'm not sure what it all means and what it all adds up to. Nothing really sticks in the brain, I'm afraid to say. And number 9 from 2003, their 8th album, The Curse of Blondie. This was 4 years in the making. A lot of it got delayed because, believe it or not, the demo tapes got lost at an airport. And there are a lot of styles alluded to on this record. There's a real sign of a restless creative spirit on this one. There's rock, dance, Latin, jazz, reggae. There's some world music. The single "Good Boys" I really, really enjoyed. I thought it was great. It had a Queen tribute rap in the middle of it. And the single got to number 12 in the UK. But the album was patchy. Got a 36 in the UK. And although Uncut Magazine did call it a pop masterclass and gave it 5 stars out of 5, I feel that this album really could have done with a great, great producer. Someone like Stephen Street, who produced Blur at their peak. I think he would have taken an album like this and really put it onto another level. At number 8, their 7th album, No Exit, from 1999. This was the big Reformation album, their first album in 17 years. And on the back of all the hullabaloo and hoopla around it, the single Maria, the kind of fairly slight single Maria, got to number 1 in the UK, which made them the first American band to have a number 1 in the UK in 3 different decades. The album has since sold over 2 million copies, and again, there's a lot of genre hopping here. There's pop and reggae and hip hop. I think that makes it all a little bit disjointed. And that, I think, is something that did curse a lot of their subsequent albums from this later period. There's just too much faffing about with different kinds of music. A lot of songs on here written by Debbie Harry alone or Christine alone, and I feel that, this is an album where they could have collaborated like they did on later records a bit more to open the songs up a bit. It feels a little bit narrow, even within the different genres that they're writing in. At number 7, from 1982, their 6th album. So this is one of the albums from the golden age of Blondie. But unfortunately, it's the album where the golden sheen really starts to rust a little bit, I think. This is The Hunter. And by this point, there were a lot of money issues. There were a lot of drug issues. There were a lot of personality issues with the band. Apparently, this was meant to be a concept album about finding and overcoming one's Mount Everest. But I have to be honest, I can't really hear it. Island of Lost Souls was sort of quite a nice single in a sweet 80s sort of way. War Child was a bit underwhelming, I think, certainly compared to the pop brilliance of their earlier efforts. The album was disappointingly received by the press and the public, and the band actually split up 6 months later. I think the album's most famous for its biggest curio, which is For Your Eyes Only, which, as you probably guessed, was written for the film. They were originally meant to do the song for the film, and actually that's a good idea for a list in the future. Top 10 best rejected Bond songs. This was their and that song is it's okay. And it's certainly not as good as the Sheena Easton Bill Conti track For Your Eyes Only. This was the last album they did with pop producer Supremo Mike Chapman, who had a big role to play in Blondie's success, it has to be said. And it was their last with the classic sort of 5-member lineup, with Frank Infante on guitar and Nigel Harrison on bass, Clem Burke on drums, Jimmy Destry on keyboards, and of course Debbie and Chris. At number 6 from 2017, their 11th album, Pollinator. Now this is my favourite of the later albums because it's a return to the band sound, and I was saying earlier about getting collaborators in. They do it with this album, but they get the right collaborators in. They get people who really understand Blondie and what made Blondie great and what we loved about Blondie. So you've got Johnny Marr on this record. You've got Nick Valenci from The Strokes, which is a perfect matchup. You've got Joan Jett. And then you've got cool people like Sia and Charlie XCX as well. Fun, Long Time, Doom or Destiny, which was a single featuring Joan Jett. They were all released as singles, and they're all pretty good. So, getting the right collaborators, the right guest writers in has opened up, the opportunities for Blondie musically on this. So it's a really solid and enjoyable listen, and it did well on the independent charts. Got to number 1 on the UK charts, and I think number 4 on the American independent charts. And number 5 from 1980, their 5th album, Auto American. This is the album where they really did start to explore all those musical genres, which kind of hampered, I think, their later albums, because you've got jazz, blues, reggae, pop, rock, ska, new wave, whatever that means. and it's this album is the album that's largely credited with making rap mainstream because of the massive single Rapture, which I'm sure you know is the first song to feature a rap to get to #1 in the USA. The other big single from this was The Tide Is High, which is a cover of a really lovely cover of the Paragons hit from 1967. Album was recorded in LA, their first time they left Manhattan to record an album. I have to say it's not a hearty meal of a record. I mean, it's quite lightweight, but it's pleasant lightweight. Rolling Stone hated it. Other reviewers were kinder, and it got to #3 in the UK and #7 in the USA. So it was a big success, but I think you could really start to feel that the sort of meat of the Blondie sandwich was thinning a little bit here. That's an appalling metaphor. I'd take that one back. I'd edit it out if I knew how, but you kind of get what I'm saying there anyway. So now, it's the top 4 albums here. As traditional with my lists, we get to the real nitty gritty, and these are the 4 albums I think to go to if you are looking to get into Blondie or revisit Blondie or that kind of thing. And at number 4 is their second album from 1978, Plastic Letters. And this is the album where Blondie actually really made a dent on the international scene, because you had the single Denis was on this album, and which was a hit all over Europe. Got to number 2 in the UK. You've also got I'm Always Touched by Your Presence Dear on this album, which was a top 10 hit. That song was written by the original bass player Gary Valentine just before he left to pursue a solo career. This album, Plastic Letters, it's punkier and dirtier than their debut album. Those who listened to that first album thought they were just another sort of lightweight pop band. We're in for quite a shock. You've got Detroit 442, Cautious Lip. It's weirder, and Debbie Harry clearly was coming to the fore as a woman with a mind and an image of her own after the sort of girl group 50 Shades of their debut album. It's tough and it's punky, but in a sort of really accessible, cartoony way, and I think that was key to a lot of Blondie's success and appeal. At number 3, their debut album from 1976, Blondie. This was originally released on the Private Stock label, but it hadn't done very well, and Chris Liss came in and rescued the band, thinking they had potential. Most famous for the song Sex Offender, which has been retitled on here as Ex Offender, but it's also got In the Flesh, Rip Her to Shreds, Little Girl Lies. This has got the real feel of the beaten girl groups of the 50s and the 60s, and much of that credit goes to the producer Richard Gotteher, who'd worked with bands like the Angels back in the day, as well as some other girl groups. Now, Debbie Harry never really wanted the band to be a retro band. She wanted them to be a sort of more new wave, forward-thinking kind of proposition. But it does really, really work here. You've got 50s, you've got punk, you've got sci-fi, that new wave thing in there as well. It's kind of like it's like West Side Story meets the Jetsons with lots of sort of 50s B-movie vibes in there as well, and I love it. I think the throwback echoes really, really suit her voice as well, and the album sort of bounces along like a kind of Grease soundtrack's bigger, naughtier sister. It's so much fun, to the point where Rolling Stone put it at number 401 in their all-time top 500 albums. I know some of you really don't like me referring to Rolling Stone so much, but look, it's as good a yardstick as any, because all these lists are all nonsense at the end of the day, aren't they, including mine. And it's very, very New York as well. So if you love that New York post-punk vibe, this is one of the first stops you should get off at. At number 2 from 1979, their 4th album, Eat to the Beat. And this is, I think, where the band really started finding the hooks. It was in the charts for a year, sort of number 1 in the UK. But you've got Dreaming, Union City Blue, the absolutely peerless Atomic. And the supporting cast is great on this album as well. Die Young, Stay Pretty, Eat to the Beat, Slow Motion. The lyrics are sharp and funny. The hooks are deep and lasting. And the album was supported by a video album where they'd done a video to every track on the album, which you could get on VHS cassette, which I had and used to watch over and over again. But according to Mike Chapman, the producer, this is though kind of where the drugs started tearing the band apart. And I think you could hear that on the next record, that things were starting to unravel a little bit for them. But my number one Blondie album is their third album from 1978, and it is, of course, Parallel Lines. This was their big breakthrough. Number 1 in the UK, number 6 in the USA. One of the top 10 albums of the year. 20 million copies sold to date. Hanging on the telephone, one way or another. Picture this, Heart of Glass. That's just for starters. And then you've got Fade Away and Radiate, 11:59. I mean, I honestly don't think there is a bad track on this album. I think it's an absolute pop diamond. Every track is just as good as the last one on here. And definitely, for me, one of the top 10 pop rock albums of all time. And there's another idea for a list. But the Portents were not good when they started making this album with Mike Chapman, because he really didn't rate them as musicians. And I have to say, if you watch some early footage of Blondie live, it's not that impressive. But you know, they're a bit sloppy, they're a bit out of time. Clem Burke is a very idiosyncratic drummer, I think, or is a nice way of putting it. And they didn't like each other. The band, you know, the personality issues were there from the get-go. They were a bunch of kind of scruffy, opinionated, fairly sort of unpleasant New York characters, really, when they got in the studio. I have no idea what they were like as personal individuals, one-on-one. But the album was recorded in only 6 weeks, and the sound, it's crisp and it's light, but there's depth in the songs. You've got guitar genius Robert Fripp, pops up on Fade Away and Radiate, and he also actually played on a live version of Heroes they did too. But the album has been universally acclaimed, and it's really where Debbie Harry's iconic legacy was cemented. 57 on Colin Larkin's top 1,000 albums of all time. 57, that's pretty darn good. I'd like an album 57 on his top 1,000 albums of all time. And I have to say, I don't think that ranking is far off at all. Like as I've said, it's pop rock perfection, and it sounds really, really effortless, which it wasn't. And to reuse one of my favourite phrases, that is a neat trick, to make something sound easy when it isn't. This is a record I put on, fairly often, considering I have a pretty large record collection, because it's just a great album that makes you feel good. So that's my rundown on Blondie's records. I think to summarise, those 4 records that made their legacy are still the 4 to go to, and the ones they made after they reformed are something of a curate's egg. There's some good stuff in there, but you have been warned. Where did Blondie go from here? Who knows? You wouldn't be surprised if they came back with another great pop record. At the same time, you wouldn't be surprised if they didn't make another record for 5, 6, 7, 10 years even, and sort of drifted into the footnotes of pop rock history. But look, I hope you've enjoyed that. I do love a bit of Blondie. I hope you do too. If you have some favourite Blondie tracks, or have your own ranking, then please let us know. We can talk about it in the below in the comments. And if you're a member of a fan club, let us know which fan club you were a member of. I was a member of quite a few. Neil Young, Iron Maiden, Queen, Blondie. I think I was a member of David Bowie's, but we're going back an awful long way now. I can't remember. But look, I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you again soon for another Rock Records review. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.